I didn't catch that the theme for this month was Introduction to Bhagavad Gita. Okay, I'm going to go in the back door. I'll So some of you are new. I didn't see the show of hands. How many of you would be reasonable to say you're not so familiar with Bhagavad Gita? You really need an introduction. One. Introduction, right? Okay. You have an idea? Okay, there's the cover. Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita is a text that's part of a big epic. Big epic means like a history of Greater India, written over 5,000 years ago. And largely the theme within this epic, I mean, it's history of um, kings and conflicts that arise between powerful persons. Huh? Okay. So while he's adjusting, you can say besides it's a history of Greater India, it's a treatise that's describing standards of moral conduct, ethical conduct. And there are personalities in that epic that represent virtue. And there's personalities within the epic that are just the opposite. They don't care. And they do skullduggery and they're just fine with it. And they're cousins. And there's back and forth. There's lessons in proper conduct or virtuous conduct. And then there's examples of the opposite. And it builds into a struggle. And the struggle ends up with a suggestion to make a peaceful solution that the bad guys reject. There has to be war. I can't live on the same planet with these other cousins of mine. So a war is being set up. So it's this literally in the middle of the text comes Bhagavad Gita. So Bhagavad Gita is a scene where just before the battle, one of the main heroes in the virtuous side requests his chariot driver Krishna, who's taking the role of the servant of his devotee, out of his kindness. Please draw my chariot in between the two armies so I can see who's on this side, who's on that side before the battle begins. And he sees the array of massive numbers of soldiers. And it's not like exactly he gets cold feet because he's a powerful hero. But his heart is disturbed by what looks like what's about to happen. And then, because he's a virtuous person, he cites 7 different reasons why this is not a virtuous thing to do, and I'm out of here. I don't want to go forward with this. And he's a key person in the events. So there's some back and forth discussion between Krishna and Arjuna, and they're because they're cousins, they're also friends. It's a friendly conversation, and it gets to the point where Arjuna says, I really don't know what's best." Then he takes the position, besides just being a friend or having this friendly talk, please take the role of my teacher, my guru, and instruct me. What's my duty? So the mood changes. And from there, Bhagavad Gita, Gita in Sanskrit means song, and Bhagavad means in relation to Bhagavan. Bhagavan means the supreme person, Bhagavan. One who possesses all opulences in full is Bhagavan. The source of everything is Bhagavan. So Bhagavan speaks Bhagavad Gita. Sometimes it's translated the Song of God. So in the course of the unfolding of Bhagavad Gita, there's another way of describing what Bhagavad Gita itself is it's a treatise on the yoga systems. And so yoga meaning linking with the Supreme. When modern times, when people hear the word yoga, the mind just goes to hatha yoga or asanas or body exercises. And sometimes it add on another layer of breathing exercise, pranayama, asanas and pranayama. But yoga is far more than that. It's linking with the Supreme, and there's principles that are instructed and applications of those principles that are instructed sequentially in Bhagavad Gita. And to keep it really simple, because this is an introduction, there's different ways of describing how those instructions in yoga system can be looked at. There's 18 chapters, and one of the ways that those who are commentators on Bhagavad Gita speak or write, 6 plus 6 plus 6 equals 18. So the first 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita have an emphasis. They say many things, but there's an emphasis on work without attachment to the fruits of work. Karma, phala means fruit, and tyag means renunciation. Work without attachment, tyag, to the fruits of work. So what's that? Because who works without something happens? You do something to get something. So karma yoga is you do something not to get something. Well, there is a fruit, but then you have to do something with that fruit, and that fruit is you offer it to the Supreme. That's karma yoga. And a subset of karma yoga is karma phala tyag, being detached from the fruits of the work but offering the fruit to the Supreme. There's a celebrated verse that's often quoted. Karmani evadikaraste ma paleshu kadachana. Ma means not, phala means fruit. You're not entitled to the fruits. You're entitled to perform your duties, because that's what Arjuna wants to know, what's my duty? You're entitled to perform your duty, and his duty, he's a military man. He's a military man. And that his duty is how to properly use that military-ness or ability is to give protection. Some people are innocent, and people that are innocent need protection from people that would harm them. So that's what a Kshatriya does. A military man is, if necessary, not wantonly, but according to codes of the spiritual teachings, scriptural teachings, how to perform that duty, and then others have other duties and other duties and other duties. How to perform your duties that are guided by the scripture in such a way you do without attachment to the results. So that's the first 6 chapters. There's many other things, but that's a main theme. And then the final 6 chapters is restating things already described, but for a fuller extent, called Gyan Yoga. Gyan means knowledge. Yoga of searching for the Supreme through one's knowledge capacities. That can acquire knowledge about the Supreme and make a connection or yoga with the Supreme through knowledge. Final 6 chapters. And the middle 6 chapters are emphasizing bhakti. You familiar with that term? Okay, good. Bhakti doesn't just mean feelings or feeling something, feeling devotion. It means there's an affective part, a feeling part, and there's an application part or an active part. It's what you do, and it's the consciousness behind what you do, the loving feelings with which you do what you do unto the Supreme. You do unto the Supreme, and you feel connection with the Supreme in a loving mood. That's bhakti. The middle 6 chapters are describing that. At the end of that, so the first 6, middle 6, final 6. At the end of the first 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita, because the question Arjuna is asked is, what's my duty? Krishna gives a summary and says, of all the things that you should do, by all means, Arjuna, be engaged in yoga. Be a yogi. And of all types of yoga, there's one that's the topmost type of yoga, or uttama, uttama yoga, topmost yoga. And that topmost yoga is bhakti. And bhakti has 2 parts. Simple. I'm just keeping it simple. What the mind does and what the body does. Madgatain antaratmana is what the mind does in bhakti. The mind is fixed on Krishna. Madgatain antaratma. Antar, atma. Atma means the soul, and the supreme soul within, antaratma. Mind absorbed in Krishna. And what the body does, Shraddha Van, with faith. Shraddha means faith. With faith, Shraddha Van. Bhajate Yomam. One engages in the senses and objects of the senses for Krishna. Now, generally speaking, when people engage their senses in sense objects, something happens. Like there's some attachment, or the opposite, repulsion. That's when it's all about me. I like it, I don't like it. It's not for me, it's not my thing. Oh, I really like it. And one gets attached. One gets attached. Quickly. Like, really quickly. So, the detachment that's essential for bhakti is attachment to the Supreme. That's taught in the first 6 chapters. Then it's emphasized further in the middle 6 chapters. Attachment to the Supreme results in detachment from thinking oneself to be the enjoyer of that which belongs to the Supreme. Supposing, this is easy, supposing I visit your house and you have something in your house, a piece of furniture or, I don't know, and I like it, and I want to make it mine, and I just take it. That's pretty rude. I mean, I could ask you to just take it and make it mine and use it in my own way. That's not polite. It's a thief. It's criminal. Similarly, in the middle six chapters of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is teaching that he's the source of everything. Since everything comes from him, it's his. And one can engage in that which is his, acknowledging it belongs to him. You making it as an offering unto him. That's bhakti. In practical activity, everyday activity. In that consciousness, that's the internal. And you do it guided by what's according to theistic conduct, what's to be done, what's not to be done, the ways to be done, etc. So what I had planned is a little different than in introduction by your presence, not knowing much about Bhagavad Gita, helped me do what they want me to do. But now I want to do what I had planned to do a little bit. Just a little sharing. You'll see how it connects to what I'm going to do next. During the pandemic, I haven't been to China, but I started visiting China in 2010. And I spent many years, of course, some time in Chicago, a lot of time in New York, and I'm used to seeing lots of people. You know, we would distribute books in the subway, in Grand Central Station, rush hour, the whole thing. It's like lots of people is not something that is foreign to me. But going to China, there's so many people. So many people. I could tell you stories, but here's one story. Once in the country, and I can't go dressed like this. Got to have a hat, got to have pants, got to have hair. You got to, this, Hare Krishna disguise. And once in the country, to go from one place to another place, it's very organized train transportation. And when you go into a train station, in not even like Beijing or some mega city, just any city, there's so many people. It makes Grand Central Station look like a kid's playground. There's so many people going all directions, and it's so if you want to get to your destination, you better know what the destination is, because there's so many trains, and fortunately I'm with some people that are they're translators, so they say this is the train. And we're sitting there watching a zillion people zoom around. So when you get on a train in China, you better have an idea what the destination is. One time they put me on a train without somebody accompanying me on the train, and I'm sitting there like, I got on the train, but I didn't even know when to get off. It was pretty freaky. Fortunately, there was somebody in the same car that spoke some English, and he let me know when it was time to get off. Anyway, with Bhagavad Gita, it's good to know where the train is going. Or when you're living your life, it's good to know where the train is going. Because another way of saying what Bhagavad Gita is, it's a guideline to how to conduct your life in such a way you reach the goal of life. It's very helpful, like not only how to reach the goal of life, what's the goal of life. There's another literature of the Bhagavad Gita is considered the undergraduate study of spiritual teaching within the Vedas, and the Bhagavatam is the graduate study. So within the graduate study book, there's a teaching that people in this world commonly, they don't know what the goal of life is. Na te vidu svartakatim hi Vishnu Sva artha. Sva artha, one's own artha means goal or something wanted, something desirable. Artha. Na te vidu swartagatim Vishnu. People of this world, they do not know what the purpose of life is, largely. They're living their life with some idea of, my goal is whatever my goal is. And then that changes and so forth and so on. But the ultimate, let's say, the ultimate goal, the purpose of life, what's this human form of life meant for? What's the purpose? Over on this side, there's birth. Over on that side, there's death. And in between is life. But what goes in that space? How are we supposed to use this human form of life? So Bhagavad Gita teaches that, what the goal is. So I wanted to, not knowing that this is supposed to be an introduction, but I think I can swing it by saying, if you're going to begin Bhagavad Gita, it's a good idea to know where the train is going. What's the goal? Anyways, if I read this book, what am I going to get from it? Besides, it's interesting. But I've read many interesting books. And where is it going to take me? And then, how do I get there? Is this what I want? So there's a phrase in the concluding verses of Bhagavad Gita that during this past weekend we spoke a little bit about. It's Ma Suchaha. Krishna, in giving the instructions that Krishna gives, I plan to discuss this evening where the train is going. There's the train of Bhagavad Gita is the topmost system of yoga concludes with Krishna saying that there are many teachings that I've given you, and I'm letting you know that those are subordinate to or secondary to the primary teaching. Just like here in the middle of the ceiling, there's a chandelier. The chandelier it's real crystal, and it probably needs to be cleaned. But when it's clean, it sparkles a lot. But that crystal, not suspended by that chain that's at the top, it's just lying on the floor. It's useless. So essential for the chandelier is the thing that supports the chandelier. So there are many, similarly, there's many parts to what's in Bhagavad Gita. There's many parts to what's in Bhagavad Gita, but there's something that's primary and the other parts are secondary to the primary. And the primary thing is indicated in the concluding teaching of Bhagavad Gita. And that is, one should surrender to Krishna alone. Mam ekam, ekam means one. Surrender unto me alone. Mam ekam sharanam. Sharana means surrender. Take shelter of me alone. All other things, they're secondary and they augment that one thing. But without the one thing, the augmentations, they're not so valuable. They won't give you the goal of life. They may give you something, but not the goal of life. So if you want the goal of life, you need to know what it is. And the goal of life is Mam Ekam Sharanam. And then at the end, when Krishna says, if you do like this, you may worry. You may have a doubt. Is this really going to work? Now, what about this? And what about that? And what about all the other things that one might consider as being important? That's okay. Consider them important, but put the primary in the primary position. And when you do that, Masuchaha. Masuchaha means do not fear. Specifically, do not fear any sinful reaction for not doing something or not doing another something or not doing a third something. Masuchaha. Masuchaha. During this past weekend, we spent some time in Naperville, this suburb nearby. And one of the topics we discussed was Srimad Bhagavatam, the story of um, you like everybody likes stories. So the story of one demoniac king, one of the he was a really bad guy. He imprisoned 20,000 kings and put them in a cave that he made into a jail and starved them. And his plan was, when he had enough of them, he was going to make a human sacrifice to get some pious points with Lord Shiva. Human sacrifice, 20,000 kings. And the kings sent a messenger to Krishna. Help! Here's our situation. We've been really attached to our situation, to our being a king and the opulence and power and so forth and so on. We realized that was foolish, but here we are. Help. We're your devotees, please help. So a number of things happen. Krishna gives a reply. And the reply says essentially the same thing. It's ma vaishta, do not fear. He says to the messenger, give this message back to the kings. I will release them from their imprisonment by destroying the person who had put them in prison. And that person, his name was Jarasandha. He was a bad guy, really bad guy. And so, same message, different book, different scripture, same message, do not fear. And it's in the plural meaning all the kings, not just the messenger. All the kings, 20,000. So that is to say, we have some other shelters, and we're attached to those other shelters. It can be property, it can be so many things. So many things. And we're attached. And when we're attached, it kind of blurs the intelligence to know what is to be done, what is not to be done. That's Arjuna's situation. He doesn't know what he's to do, what's his duty. It's a difficult situation that he's in. So, when you take the position of Mam Ekam Sharanam, or taking full shelter of Krishna, everything is adjusted by Krishna. And he's the supreme controller, Parama Ishvara. Ishvara Parama Krishna, Sachit Ananda Vigraha. That's Krishna's position. So we're going to go to Bhagavad Gita, where finding shelter in the words of Bhagavad Gita, and particularly finding shelter in the concluding message of Krishna in Bhagavad Gita. So the concluding message of Bhagavad Gita is in chapter 18. This is the exercise of where's the train going? In vernacular, there's a leadership personality, I won't mention his name, but one of his teachings is begin with the end in mind. We've probably all heard that one before. Begin with the end in mind. So that's what we're doing. What's the end? The chapter 18 is the final chapter. All the chapters have a yoga term with an adjective. So one of our commentators calls chapter 18 Moksha Yoga, the yoga of liberation. And another, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, identifies it as Prapati Yoga. Prapati is another word for surrender. Prapati Yoga, or the final attainment of life. Prapati, goal of life. Some of you, this is maybe not necessary, but I'll do it anyways because it's just an embellishment. In the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya, they're very fond of Ramayana, and many of the commentators on Ramayana consider Ramayana to be a treatise on surrender, which one could say that's Bhagavad Gita also, because that's the goal of Bhagavad Gita, surrender. And here's a little statement taken directly from their authorities. In Ramayana, the glory of service to Ram and his associates is narrated. The sambandha, that's relationship, the sambandha of the living entities is that they are eternal servants of the Supreme Lord. We're parts of, and we have some relationship because we're parts of the Supreme. The goal is devotional service. In Ramayana, devotional service to Lord Ram. In Bhagavad Gita, devotional service unto Krishna. Devotional service unto Bhagavan, the Supreme. And the means of reaching the goal, when we have an eternal relationship with the Supreme, is devotional service. And the means is this taking shelter, sharanagati. So remember what this final instruction of Krishna, Mam Ekam Sharanam, same verbal root, Sharanam, Sharanagati, take shelter, surrender, full surrender. In the process of surrender, this is, begin with the end in mind. So the process of surrender has 6 divisions or limbs, 6 angas, and here they are. Accepting things favorable for devotional service, rejecting things unfavorable for devotional service. That sounds pretty good. So that surrender is take that which is favorable, you do it. That which is unfavorable, you leave it to the side. Conviction that Krishna will give me protection. That's this ma suchaha, don't fear. Krishna will give you protection. Thus, I feel confident in taking shelter and surrendering to Krishna because he's going to give me protection from everything. Next is accepting the Lord as one's guardian or master. Goptritve varanam tata. It's like a father or a master or someone's guardian, someone's a superior who's looking after you. You're in good hands in accepting Krishna as that person, not some other person. Some other person may have that role, but where does that other person get their capacity to do what that other person is doing? Ultimately, it's in the personality of Godhead's hand. Atma Nivedana, or Atma Nikshepa, surrender, full body, mind, and words, everything, surrender to the Supreme. And finally, humility. Now, in one sense, humility is the first one. And then comes the other ones. But those are the 6. So this topic is, where's the train going? And the train, so when we get on the train, we have an idea where it's going. It's take shelter of Krishna. And these are the limbs of taking shelter of Krishna. And devotion, when we practice devotion, it gives rise to gradual purification on one side. That means unwanted things gradually diminish, and the wanted things gradually are nourished. Give up the unwanted, and the wanted becomes and it's natural. Just like a seed. Within a seed, there's whatever there's the seed of. Let's say it's a plant or a tree. We say a tree. A common example that's given in the scriptures is a banyan tree. A banyan tree has has not just seeds; it has fruits, and within the fruits there's hundreds of seeds, and each of those seeds has the potency, the potential of creating another banyan tree. You have to cultivate it properly, but the potential is already there. You can't like inject it; it's already there. Similarly, the soul has this potential of reaching where the train is going, reaching this goal of perfection. The potential is there. It's removal of unwanted and awakening of wanted. It's already there. It just there's a there's a process or a sadhana or a practice, and by proper practice, the unwanted is diminished and the wanted grows. Anyone that's done gardening or cultivating anything knows that's how it works. It may take some time. That's okay. Within the seed is life. And in this process of surrender unto Krishna, there's anticipation of getting mercy. So there's something that we do, but it's not just something you do. You're not just hanging out on your own like, I hope it happens. There's a relationship. The relationship is with a person who has all power, all potency, and by nature is very loving. Or my phrase is Krishna is very kind. The one who feels that kindness, has confidence in that kindness, it's easy to give yourself to that person who is very kind. It's easy. It's easy. It's quite natural. It's unnatural to do otherwise. And bhakti, the developing of bhakti is like that. So again, it's really helpful to know when you get in that train station in China, you better know what train you want to get on, because who knows where you're going to end up if you don't know. So life is like that. What's it meant for? What's the goal? So we're going to spend a little bit of time now on the final instructions of Bhagavad Gita. It's 1866 is a well-known verse, but we're going to lead up to 1866 by covering these three, 64, 65, 66. Commentators, particularly, this is Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, but our commentators write, these three groups of chapters, it's 6 in Bhagavad Gita, it's a metaphor. Inside, there's a crown jewel, and the crown jewel is in a box. So the first 6 and the final 6 are part of the box. And then there's the jewel inside. I'm going to skip this because it's really poetic, but it gives the meaning. There's another metaphor that I like even better than this one, and that is there's 3 things. Hope you can follow. It's to appreciate the essence of Bhagavad Gita. So supposing in a family there's some heirlooms, some valuables, that's so common in our present culture, but something, ornaments and golden something, 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 valuables. And the values are passed on from generation to generation, so that there's at least some security in these valuables if everything else becomes a problem. There's some asset that's in the family. So when there's valuables like that, the question is, where do you keep them? You put them out by the front gate of your house? Do you put them in the backyard? Or you put them somewhere in the middle of the house in a safe place? That's easy. So the idea is similarly, the middle 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita, that's where they are. It's why they are. It's why they are where they are. Or a second example is when there's a procession. When there's a procession, supposing there's a VIP that's agreed to be part of a procession, where does the VIP go? Does he go in the front? Does he go in the middle? Or does he go at the end? He goes at the end. I'm going to tell a story because I think it's story time. Some years ago, um, the Krishna book, excuse me, the Krishna Balaram temple was being opened. It was a big deal, big deal. And the governor of UP, many of you are from India, so you know where UP is. The governor of UP agreed to come. So a week before he came, there was like the festivities and the installation of the deities and the whole big thing. There were hundreds, more than hundreds, many hundreds of police, government police, all over the place, making sure of the security because the governor's going to come. And then on the day, he is in the middle. In the front was the military, and the middle was the governor, and the back were all the ministers. Then it was like riding in their little white ambassadors, and it was like cute. But he was in the middle, and when he came, it was a big deal. It was nice that he came. So that was a very, very practical example of the culture of the VIP is in the middle of a procession. And then the third example that's given. Now, modern homes have different structures, but a common, let's say, an A-frame home. What's most important? The walls and the windows and the doors, or the foundation and the structure that holds the whole thing up, or all the fixtures and the sinks and tubs and faucets and all those the finishing work that goes into building something. It's the foundation and the A-frame that holds everything up. So similarly, the middle 6 chapters are like that. That's what this was saying. So this is using another metaphor, the metaphor of a jewel, and the jewel's in the box, and the box is made of gold. But why you have a gold box? Because you got something valuable that's inside, and that's the jewel. The jewel is bhakti. And the conclusion of these verses at the end of chapter 18 is the jewel, Mami Kam Sharanam, the essence of bhakti, taking full shelter of Krishna. So this is now a commentator saying, introducing these final 64, 65, 66, where the commentator is Krishna's glancing at Arjuna. He's spoken the whole Bhagavad Gita, and now he's going to put a ribbon and some bow on it. So glancing at Arjuna, his very dear friend, standing silently as he began to review the very deep meaning of the Gita scripture, the Lord, his heart melting like butter, due to his mercy, spoke. That's a nice aesthetic way to describe what's coming up. Oh, my dear friend Arjuna, I will now speak the essence of the whole scripture in 8 verses, but it's going to be 3. So I don't know exactly where the 8 comes from. So don't ask me. Forget about the difficulties in having to review everything in order to understand it, because there are some details in Bhagavad Gita. Essences are fine. There's some details that are a little puzzling, but don't worry about it, Arjuna. Capture this, because I'm repeating now the essence of the whole book. This is where the train is going. This is what the human purpose of life is. Please listen carefully, Arjuna. So he, Krishna says, Sarvagoyatamam bhoyaha shinu me paramam vacha ishtosi me dridham iti tato vakshami te hitam. Should we say it together? Let's say it together. Sarvagoyatamam bhoya shinu me paramam vachaha ishtosi me dridham iti tato vakshami te hitam. This word vakshami somehow keeps appearing in Bhagavad Gita, like several places. And it means, I will explain. So the essence of this, the reason for making a stress on this, besides the fact that it appears several times, is knowledge from a perfect source is passed through sound. Now, information is maybe not so important, is commonly passed through sound. You know, all kinds of, here, as we're sitting here in this room, there's all kinds of signals going this way, that way, and hope people have their cell phone turned off because your phone may ring, but the signals are going on: radio, television, phone, etc., etc. But you have to have a receiver to pick up the signal on the right frequency, etc. Then you can pick up the signal. So there's a reception. Similarly, there's a reception of transcendental vibration. And the vibrator is very important. That's Krishna, Vakshami. And the receiver, when the receiver is on the right channel and is on, that's Arjuna or us. The transcendental consciousness can be transmitted through sound. So Vakshami. Here's what Krishna says. Because you are my very dear friend, I'm speaking to you my supreme instruction, the most confidential knowledge of all. Most confidential knowledge of all. It's an open secret. It's an open secret because people that are not connected with devotion, they won't understand it. So he can openly declare it and people still won't get it. It's okay. Because it's confidential. But, Arjun, because you're so dear to me, you're my very dear friend and my devotee, you'll understand it. Hear this from me, for it is for your benefit. Now, going back, this is where the train is going. Going back in the course of before we get to the final stop of the train, there's mention again and again in bhakti about bhakti and bhakti that's unmixed. There's different terms to describe adjectives that describe unmixed bhakti, Shuddha bhakti, Amala bhakti, and so forth. There's and our commentators here are using the term nirapeksha bhakta. That it means having no material motive. So such a person can understand. Now, the material motive, just like we talked about karma yoga, is you do work, which is because the soul is within the body, it animates the body. You're going to do something. Unless you're dead, you're going to do something. When you do something, there's the result of that something. So nirapeksha is not having a material motive when doing something. You still do something. And there's still a result or a fruit that comes from that something. And what do you do with that something? If you have a material motive, it's mine. And if you don't have a material motive, it belongs to Krishna. So let me offer it to Krishna. Very simple. So this is a message that's meant for such persons. Or they will understand it and receive the fullness of the message. Now, that was text 64, which leads us to text 65, which is, let's say the verse together. Manmana bhavad mad bhakto madhyaji mam namaskaro Mad evaishyasi satyam te pratijane prayosi me. Translation: four things. Always think of me, manmana. Become my devotee, bhava madbhakto. Worship me and offer your homage unto me. Thus you will come to me without fail. Mam evaishyasi. I promise, satyam te. I promise. Now, a dictionary definition of this word satyam is it means oath, a promise. Satyam. Satyam can mean generally it means truth, but when it's spoken by a person in this context, it means I give you my promise. I'm taking an oath before you, Arjuna. You will come to me. You do these four things. Now, it's 6:30. I'm looking at our timekeeper. Who's our timekeeper? That's you. Should I try to wind it up fast? No? You don't want to put a leash on me, huh? Okay. I'll do a mini version because what's coming next is one of our principal acharyas that several hundred years ago lived in Vrindavan and wrote commentaries on many things, including Bhagavad Gita. He's going to break down these four. Manmana. Here we go. Manmana bhava madbhakto. That's two. Means become my devotee. Only think of me. The Lord says this to exclude other possibilities. He does not mean be a jnani or be a yogi and meditate on me. It's one thing. Manmana bhava madbhakto. Manmana bhava also can mean be situated with your mind completely absorbed in me, Shamsundar, with a moon-like face, with shining locks of hair and beautiful eyebrows, raining nectar in the form of glances of sweet mercy. Now, this Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur he's not just a poet, he relishes, he's a rasika bhakta, he relishes rasa. So in his commentaries, that's what he's doing. Bhava Mad Bhakta can also mean give all your senses, such as the ears, to me. Adore me, Bhava Mad Bhakta, using all the senses with such services as hearing, chanting, seeing my Murti. Murti is the deities here. Cleaning and anointing my temple, picking flowers, and offering me garlands, ornaments, umbrellas, and chamara, the fan. I think I'm going to go quickly ahead because this is relishable for people who want to go deeply into the meanings of such a verse as this. This verse, Manmana Bhava Mad Bhakto Madhyaji Mamnas Guru. There's one verse in Bhagavad Gita that appears twice, and this is that one that appears twice. It appears at the end of chapter 9, which is midway of 18. It appears at the end of chapter 18, which is to the end. And it's repeated, which tells us this is really important. There isn't any other verse that's repeated like this. So it's important. The flag goes up. This is really important. So there's these divisions. And the conclusion of what he says, if you do these four things, you'll come to me. So it's really good to know what those four things are. That's like good to know when you get on the train, where's it going? Before you get on the train. Where do you want to go? Then pick the right train to get you there. I'm going to go forward like this. A second commentator is much more simple. Now the Lord gives the instruction. This has been explained before. This is the end of chapter 9, same verse. Here it is again in chapter 18, same verse. By concentrating your mind on me, worshiping me and offering respect to me, you will attain only me, Krishna, with human form, the son of Devaki, most affectionate to you. You will attain me with dark complexion, the color of the blue lotus, not the universal form. There's another chapter, Bhagavad Gita, chapter 11, universal form. With 1,000 heads, nor the form of Paramatma, that's the Lord of the heart. It's a form of Krishna, the size of a thumb. Not Nrsimha or Rahat, the other Leela avatars, but Krishna. You'll attain me. Being your friend, I will give myself to you. I make this oath to you. It's a relationship. These are things that will indicate your affection for me. These four things. As you do those, I give myself to you. It's my oath. This Ma Suchaha. Don't worry, don't doubt, have no fear. I promise you. But my doubt is not destroyed, because even when you made a vow, you did not return from Mathura to Braja. Uh-oh. Does that mean something to you? When Krishna was first born, his childhood pastimes were in the countryside. He was living like a village boy. The personality of Godhead was in a family of cowherds. He loved the cows, and the cows loved him. And at a certain stage, when he was around 11, he was invited to come to Mathura, the capital. The idea was the wicked king wanted to kill him. It didn't work. It worked the other way. But when Krishna left Vrindavan, the village, he promised them he would come back. So this is a commentator saying, you promised and you didn't come back. He did come back later. And there's a reason why he didn't come back sooner. One of the reasons was they were in the appearance of Krishna in this world, described earlier in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, Bhagavad Gita. A reason for Krishna's appearance in this world was there were too many demoniac kings, and the earth personified and the demigods appealed to the Supreme Lord, please appear and stop these demoniac kings. They're too powerful. So he agreed, yes, I will do that. So his reasoning was, one of the reasons, was if I go to Vrindavan, I went to Mathura, I killed Kamsa. If I go back to Mathura, all these other demoniac kings, they're going to understand I have affection for Vrindavan, so they're going to go and harass the people in Vrindavan. So I have to finish off the business for which I came. Then I'll go, which is what he did. Okay. This is interesting. I hope you... Anyway, it's a little involved. Therefore, I have said this after making an admission, pratijane, you are dear to me. If the residents of Mathura, having an affectionate mind, if the resident of Mathura, having an affectionate mind, does not cheat the one he loves, then what to speak of the one he loves the most? I have great affection for he who has great affection for me. It's the nature, it's just human. It's this personalism. Affection is exchanged proportionate to the affection that one has from others. I cannot tolerate separation from the person who has affection for me. I have already said this with the words from chapter 7 Bhagavad Gita. Priyohi. Therefore have faith in my words. You will certainly attain me. Now, I'm going to wind this up, although there's much more to be said. The concluding verse, the concluding instruction of Krishna in Bhagavad Gita is the next one, 1866. It's a celebrated verse. So one of our acharyas does this preamble. Supposing Krishna asks himself this question, or asks Krishna the question, am I supposed to perform meditation and other process you just mentioned, along with my varna and ashram duties, or without them? Because meditation, chapter 6, is about meditation. And am I supposed to do those other systems of yoga along with this one? And what about there's duties just being in the world. So, supposing somebody's a mother. I see some children running around, so there must be some mothers here. So there's a duty of a mother. There's a duty of the father. There's a duty of a government person. There's a duty of a scholar. There's a duty of an agriculturalist. There's a duty. According to one's living situation and one's occupational position, there's duties. So what about those? If you're saying this is paradharma, is to take shelter, am I supposed to do the other ones or not? The swadharma ones. You follow? Is it clear? Surrender to Krishna, that's topmost. What about the things that are also good? And they should be done because they're duties in life. Do I do them or do I not do them? Well, I'm doing this one. So here comes the verse. Sarvadharmam parityaja mamekam sharanam braja aham tvam sarva papebhyo moksha yashami masuchaha. There's the phrase, masuchaha. Do not fear. So I'm going to wind it up by just pointing to the chandelier again. A nice chandelier has crystal, and crystal has the quality that it diffuses light softly. Although the bulb behind the crystal may be very bright, it diffuses the light, and it's a very nice, besides it's decorative, it's a nice source of light. But without that piece that's holding the chandelier up, then it's just lying on the floor and it's useless. I mean, it's not functional. In that sense, useless. But, hang it to that cable that's in it going into the ceiling. Then it's very nice. Turn the electricity on and nice. So this verse is saying the same thing. I'm going to end with this because of time. There are many teachings that I've given, paraphrasing what's being said. There are many teachings that I've given you. And they're good. Otherwise I wouldn't have given it. But they're meant to bring you to this one position. That one position is Mam Ekam Sharanam. Surrender unto me alone. We discussed earlier what surrender means. There's 6 divisions. But that's it. This is the primary thing. And the other things are secondary to the primary. So subordinate. Don't trash those secondary. Just subordinate them to the primary. Then there's functional. There's purpose to the secondary. Say it the other way. Supposing the primary is missing, what's the value of the secondary? Just gather a whole bunch of secondary things, a whole bunch of pieces of crystal. It's nice, but it's not functional. So the conclusion of Bhagavad Gita is this, this verse. Take shelter, full shelter of Krishna. In those ways that were mentioned, those 6 aspects or features or limbs of surrender, and you do those things, and Krishna is saying, I promise you, I will give myself to you. You give yourself to me in these ways, I give myself to you. It's a relationship. Now, supposing we say, well, let me think about it. No, Krishna he's not going to impose himself. Look, I'm telling you, surrender to me. Got it? Not like that. We have free will, and we exercise the free will according to the indication given in Bhagavad Gita. Then we'll come to Krishna. That is to say, moksha say that the position of the last line, moksha yashyami masuchaha, or as one commentator, Baladev Vidyabhusan, said, is moksha dharma. It's the means of ending the cycle of birth and death, and with it, all of the sufferings that come due to ignorance. The Vedas teach us that the root cause of suffering is ignorance, because from ignorance comes ignorant desire. From ignorant desire comes ignorant activity. From ignorant activity comes suffering. Solution? Eradicate ignorance. What does that look like? This is what it looks like. The crystals of the chandelier are not thrown out. Knowledge is not thrown out, but the essence of that knowledge is taking shelter of Krishna. And then all the other as an introduction to Bhagavad Gita, which didn't exactly understand I was supposed to do, get on the train, go read Bhagavad Gita carefully, knowing where the train is going. What's the purpose of this book? What's the purpose of life? There's song. What's it all about, Alfie? They make a Broadway musical, and they still don't know what it's all about. Bhagavad Gita wants us to know what it's all about. What's the mission of human existence? How is it to be executed? That's Bhagavad Gita. So the introduction to Bhagavad Gita has, at least I did some aspect of it. So hopefully you want to read Bhagavad Gita and, understand the how-to and the different steps in the unfolding of that higher consciousness that's innate within us, just heard. Okay, let's see if there's some discussion. We have time? We have some time. 2 minutes, right? Maybe 3 minutes. One question. He's really got me on a leash now. Go ahead. Anyone? I see 2 hands. I see 3 hands. What are you going to do about that? You got the microphone. You go do it. I don't know who raised
that. It's on. Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
I was told that natural state of the soul, which is Atma,
Natural state of the soul
is to be in the relationship with the Lord.
Fantastic.
Right. How did it lose its memory of its relationship?
How do we lose that natural state and become diseased? That's the question?
I didn't get that.
Is your question, we have a natural state, how do we lose that natural state?
Oh, yeah, exactly. How did it lose that memory?
That's a good question. One answer is somehow or other. Or another way of saying somehow or other is to say When you're drowned, this is Prabhupada, chapter 13 of Bhagavad Gita. I forget which purport. Someone can look it up while I'm sitting here, where he says, um, when a man is drowning, the right question to ask is not how did I get here, but how do I get out? Because once you get out, then you'll be able to understand how you got here. If you're told while you're drowning how you got here, you won't be able to understand it fully. Something to that effect. So here's another way of answering your question. You ready? Misuse of free will. We have living entities are parts and parcels of the supreme living entity. The supreme living entity has unlimited free will. As its part and parcel, we have tiny free will. When tiny free will is misused, then we find ourselves in this place. Proper use, we find ourselves in our natural relationship with the Supreme. There's some further questions, but you're not asking them, so that's okay. No, you got the microphone. We end? We end. Okay. Thank you all very much for coming. You're going to make your concluding announcements, right? Hare Krishna. Shri Shri Kishore Kishori ki. Srila Prabhupada ki.